Excited because I get to talk to you about what is going to happen in the real estate market post-election. Look, we talked a lot about, our expectations for the real estate market after the election. Real estate isn't like the stock market. Look, we saw the stock market rise 3.5 points in one day after it was announced that Trump won the election, and real estate just is a lot more slow moving than that in terms of how it impacts values. Now, demand, it's really hard to say. There's no easy way to measure demand between whether a Republican or a Democrat wins the election because you only get one choice, right? So right after the election, if demand bumps up, then everyone says, well, hey, it was because, the Republican, Trump got elected, or the last time it was because Biden got elected. But in reality, a lot of that extra demand comes from the fact that the election is over. And now we get back to normality and people don't have that as like this fear-mongering thing holding over them. However, this year I felt a little bit more of a bump than I felt the last time in terms of demand, website traffic, calls into our office, people wanting to sell, people wanting to buy. There's no question there was some fence sitting from the election, but I also think we've elected for the second time a president that has made his wealth in real estate, is a real estate developer, has been a real estate broker, has multiple real estate entities in his background. Now, most of his wealth comes from his brand and his Truth social media platform. However, he started and built it as a real estate guy. He is a real estate guy. His family is a real estate family. So I think there is a lot of hope and anticipation that some of the policies he enacted the last time, which led to some of the best real estate markets we've seen in a long time, will get put back into place, and we will start to see that again. It also could be a contributing factor, the hurricanes. We're now a little further past the hurricanes. More of our areas have been cleaned up and debris removed. People are starting to get those homes renovated. Our areas are looking less and less like a disaster zone. So you have demand opening back up from people that, may have simply been sitting on the fence because they didn't really want to buy into an area that looked like a disaster zone. So that contributes. Now, in reality, another thing that post-election ends up happening that I think will contribute to the success of our real estate market, whether that's people selling and moving because we need listings, or people moving into the market because we need buyers, you're going to continue to see, moves in and out of our state because our state is a polarizing one. Let's face it, Trump won the election by 13 points, okay? It was a landslide. Miami-Dade County is always blue. It went red. And so that's unheard of. That just doesn't happen. So we've become this really, really red state. And what ends up happening from that is, this is my 20th year in real estate, and I've never been in a real estate market where there were more politically motivated moves. So I'll give you an example. Even 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago, and obviously during that time frame, it's continued to become more political over the last several years. But going back to maybe halfway through my real estate career, I never heard the conversation of people saying, oh, I'm moving because of, the politics, either where I'm moving from or the politics of where I'm moving to. And the reality is, up until that time, Florida had been kind of we were one of those states that kind of went back and forth. There were years we were Democrat, there were years that we were Republican. We were pretty much a middle of the ground state. So we weren't so far right or so far left that it caused that motivation. We were pretty center. We were probably a battleground state, right? Once DeSantis was elected, and then over time, we've become more and more conservative. And then obviously this election kind of really opened a lot of people's eyes. Trump went from winning Florida by 5 points to winning it by 13. So the context of that is people say, oh, well, all the people that live in Florida are becoming more Republican. And the reality is maybe there's a little bit of that, but a lot of the people that don't support the Republican Party or Democrat or far left have moved, okay? And they've moved to areas that are, historically maybe a little bit more left, the Northeast or out West, right? And so on the converse of that, we've had people that live in California, for example, and a lot of New York, a lot of the Northeast that didn't love how left those areas were becoming and moved to Florida because we're more conservative and more right. So the reality is that people in Florida aren't becoming more conservative. Our population is becoming more conservative because some of the liberal folks are leaving, and we're getting more of an influx of people that have more of a conservative mindset. So that causes moves both ways. That causes us to attract population, okay, as well as release population. So that is good and bad for our real estate market. It's good in that it creates transactions, especially in a market where transactions have been down. It's bad because it could potentially lead to population drops. Now, fortunately, as we've become more political, not more political, but more right, the loss of population has been far surpassed by the people wanting to move into our state. And so that continues to supply our demand, and we create transactions from the people that say, I'm going to sell and leave because I want to live somewhere else because it doesn't align with my belief system. So, ultimately it ends up probably being positive for our real estate market. Now, who knows how much of that continues? Who knows how long that continues? But the reality is that when I hear people say that, we're going to see a mass exodus of Florida, it's going to crush the real estate market. Now, the reality is we're going to probably continue to attract more people from other parts of the country than we lose. Because again, even though we may get those political moves, we also get the people that move because we have no state income tax. We get the people that move because we're still more affordable. We're starting to lose some of that because of insurance and property taxes, but we're still more affordable than a lot of other places in our climate. While we had 2 really, really bad storms, the last 10 years have not been riddled in Tampa Bay with a lot of bad storms. And ultimately, there are enough consumers to say, they got those out of the way, so now we can move. So we still have a year-round sunshine. We don't have snow. We don't have ice. And that's attractive to people, and it's attractive to retirees. So while we'll get the politically motivated moves, we're always going to get the moves that we've always gotten, which is, people retiring and people wanting to live in Florida. So hopefully that helps you understand kind of my take on what we're seeing, with the real estate market. And, just to kind of give you a background after 20 years, like I said, the first half of my real estate career, man, I never heard people moving here for politics. But as we've become more red and more right, you get more people that are either moving here or moving out. And I remember even back probably like 5 or 6 years ago, I started seeing more, people from out west. We always got the Northeast because we're close, right? Like we're close, and, a lot of New Yorkers vacation down here and end up loving it, end up moving here, right? But we really didn't get like California, for example. And recently, over the last few years, I see a lot more California moves. And people might say, we do, Andrew, you live in South Tampa. And I'm not talking military moves, okay? Like, I know how to differentiate those. Like, we get plenty of people at PCS here from the West Coast to McDill Air Force Base and maybe have a California license plate. I'm talking about California license plates in the burbs and people that are not affiliated with the military that have moved here because they disagree with how far left California is. So again, our politics is always going to have an impact on our real estate market. And so far, it's been a relatively positive one. I think that continues for the next 4 years. I'm really hopeful and optimistic. And I felt a nice bump this week. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean prices are going to rise or transactions are going to increase, because the storms and the pent-up demand from the storms could be contributing, because all these things are kind of a perfect storm at once. But I did in my business this week, as I talked to my 40 team members and my agents and my staff, I did feel like there was a pickup, and there has been a renewed sense of positivity about our real estate market and our recovery. Now, a lot remains to be seen. Look, we still have to get through to an inauguration, and then we've got to see what kind of policies get enacted that could be pro-real estate. However, the writing is on the wall that we'll see some improvement and drops in interest rates. The Fed has already signaled continuing to drop interest rates. The market's already mostly priced that in, so don't expect huge moves from Fed rate drops. But when the Fed makes a move that is slightly more aggressive or less aggressive than is expected, then obviously you can have that. But the quarter point rate drop has been talked about forever. So, you kind of get the status quo with a quarter point rate drop, higher than a quarter point rate drop, and then obviously you see more of an impact on rates and a faster lowering mortgage rates. But most mortgage rates have already factored in what happens with the Fed, unless the Fed goes more aggressive, which we have seen. The reality is that when you hear the Fed dropping rates, it's usually not the huge drop equal translation to a drop in mortgage rates like people might suspect. But there's definitely a trend. It's definitely heading in the direction of lower interest rates. We expect that trend to continue. I believe 2025 will be a better real estate market than 2024. I believed that before the storms, so definitively I believe that now. September was brutal, truthfully, for our real estate market. So October stats haven't come out, and I can just tell you it was also pretty rough because you had that storm and it eliminated or pushed so many transactions. That's going to have an overall negative impact on our 2024 real estate year in the marketplace. I suspect 2025, my hope obviously is that we don't have as many impactful storms, and certainly not any that hit back to back. And I think that will ultimately lead us, in addition to all the economic things, to a much better real estate market in Tampa Bay in 2025.